Hello, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Football. My name is John Halpin. Back again with another abbreviated episode of our podcast, Let's Talk Football. My co-host, Chris Palma, is still on vacation. And Palma, I hope you're having a wonderful time on vacation. But don't worry, I'm still here to recap you and get you back on track on everything you may have missed on Week 4 of the NFL. So let's get started. Let's start right with the Thursday game, which was Miami Dolphins against the Cincinnati Bengals. And boy, it was a scary game after Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa got concussed early in the game. And you hate to see it. It was so horrible to see. He shouldn't have been out there because he suffered a head injury the week prior against the game against the Bills. So for every football fan, we wish Tua a very safe and healthy recovery. That being said, the game did go on, and Dolphins backup quarterback Teddy Bridgewater came into the game and made it a very competitive effort, but to the Dolphins' detriment. Cincinnati took the win 27-15, having the Bengals go back to getting back the Bengals to 2-2 in the division. And the Miami Dolphins get their first loss of the season. So let's move on to the Sunday games, starting with the game in London. The Minnesota Vikings against the New Orleans Saints. And this was a very highly competitive game and a fun game to watch if you were up early in the morning to see it. It was broadcasted at 9:30 in the morning. But it was still a wonderful game to watch. The Minnesota Vikings came out on top 28-25. And this is one of those games I highly encourage you check out the highlights because there was plenty of highlights to go around. So let's continue on with the afternoon slate of games, starting with my Baltimore Ravens losing to the Buffalo Bills 23-20 in a rainy effort. It was with a controversial call by John Harbaugh not electing to kick a field goal, which would have brought the Ravens up, but instead the Bills marched down the field and get the field goal themselves and ultimately win the game. Buffalo goes to 3-1, and the Ravens fall to 2-2, playing the Bengals on Sunday night primetime this upcoming week, and I am excited for that game. Ooh, man. Okay, so let's move on to Jacksonville and Philadelphia in a really fascinating game. The Jacksonville Jaguars are one of those teams that they are now up and coming, and they are no longer an easy win. But man, they gave Philly all they could handle. But Philly ultimately took the win, 29-21. But hey, look out for the Jags. The Jags are on the rise. So let's move to Chris Palma's Pittsburgh Steelers losing in an upset to the New York Jets. Zach Wilson makes his return, and Kenny Pickett makes his debut. And boy, these two young studs were going at it this game, but Kenny Pickett threw 3 interceptions, which ultimately cost the Steelers 24-20. Jets move to 2-2. Very impressive for the Jets. So let's head south a little bit to the city of Atlanta, where the Atlanta Falcons took on the Cleveland Browns, and the Atlanta Falcons won 23-20. Ooh, they are looking hot. Atlanta is looking like a feisty team, and they are just scoring points on command. Woo, you love to see it. So that was Atlanta coming away with a great win. So let's move a little more south to Dallas, Texas, where the Cowboys took on the Washington Commanders, and the Dallas Cowboys ultimately won 25-10 with that stellar defense, wreaking havoc upon the Washington Commanders. And man, the Commanders are just absolutely befuddled. Carson Wentz is just a sloppy quarterback, but man, it's not going to get any easier for the Commanders. And for the Cowboys, Dak will soon make his return. So let's see when exactly he'll come back. He'll probably miss week 5, maybe week 6, possible week 7 return, but we'll let you know as soon as we find out the information. Let's move on to probably the biggest surprise of the weekend. The Seattle Seahawks getting it done in Detroit, 48-45. That's right, I said that correct. 48-45. This was a wild game to check out. This is another game you have to check out the highlights, because I don't think anyone expected this high scoring of a game between these two teams. Now, maybe they have no defense, but Geno Smith, to his credit, he is playing very well, bringing the Seahawks to 2-2 for the year. And this was a surprising game of Week 4. But let's move on to the Los Angeles Chargers getting it done over the Houston Texans, 34-24. Woo! Chargers look back to form. They're still hurt. They're still down a key couple players, but they look back to form. So let's move to the AFC South, where the Tennessee Titans took on the Indianapolis Colts, and the Titans came away with a win, 24-17. Woo! Titans, they're trying to get back on track, and you like to see it too. Can the Titans get back on track? And can Indy get to any form? Was that win against the Chiefs just an aberration? Who knows? But we shall see going forward. So let's move to the Big Apple. The New York Giants taking on the Chicago Bears in a very low-scoring affair, 20-12. But this was another one of those games that we kind of figured this was going to be very low-scoring. But, hey, Giants move to 3-1. That's right, I said the Giants are 3-1. Woo! Giants fans, you must be feeling happy right now, but hey, the feeling won't last long, because it's going to get harder as the season goes on. So let's move to the NFC. Let's stick to the NFC with the Arizona Cardinals taking on the Carolina Panthers in a commanding win, 26-16, and Carolina just cannot seem to get it right. Oh man, this is going to be real tough for Baker Mayfield, because man, that team does not look good by any stretch of the imagination. And the Cardinals, they're not looking good either, but they're still winning some games. So the Cardinals get back to 2-2, and that division is up for grabs in the NFC West. So let's move on to the Fox Sunday game of the week. The New England Patriots taking on the Green Bay Packers. And Brian Hoyer, the quarterback for the New England Patriots, started this game but had to ultimately leave this game due to a head injury. And so the Patriots started quarterback Bailey Zappi, a rookie quarterback named Bailey Zappi. That's a weird name, but hey, he balled out. He threw for 99 yards, nothing stellar, but he was pretty much the field general Bill Belichick was looking for. They ultimately tied the game at 24, bringing it to overtime, but yet the Packers came away with the win, 27-24. Hey, maybe the Packers are getting right back on track, but you feel for the Patriots because, they got some tough competition in the AFC, but it's going to be tough sledding for them. So let's move on to the AFC West. And the Las Vegas Raiders getting their first win of the season over the Denver Broncos, 32-23. You like to see it, Raiders fans, but what's going on with the Broncos? The Broncos do not look good this year. I think, myself included, we had higher expectations for the Broncos, but they just cannot seem to get it right. But hey, good win for the Raiders. They're in the win column, and that leaves the Texans, the only winless team left in the league. So let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a commanding win, 41-31. Patrick Mahomes beating Tom Brady. Oh, you love to see it. And this was a great game to watch because, hey, anytime Tom Brady loses is always a good game. But oh man, this was Patrick Mahomes at his finest, doing some Houdini-esque moves. Just Patrick Mahomes is in an absolute class of his own. And man, he puts himself right in the conversation for MVP. So let's move on to the last game of the week, the Monday night primetime game. the Los Angeles Rams against the San Francisco 49ers. And man, Kyle Shanahan just showed how he has Sean McVay's number. And the San Francisco 49ers win 24-9. Woo! This was a very tight game, but ultimately Matt Stafford threw a pick six that sealed the deal for the Niners. And that leaves the 49ers back in contention for the NFC West. So that was week 4. I hope you all enjoyed week 4 because, man, we have some great games looking forward to in week 5, and I cannot wait for week 5. So let's get started. I'm going to tell you my picks as well as Chris Palmer's picks on who we think is going to win this upcoming week. So let's start with the Thursday night game, the Indianapolis Colts and the Denver Broncos. Now, this game is going to be played in Mile High Stadium. Both teams are not looking too good. They're kind of a little shaky, a little rusty, and I think we all expected both of these teams to be better than what they are. But yet, both teams coming away with a loss from last week. The Colts lost to the Titans, and the Broncos lost to the Raiders. Both divisional games. It's going to set them back a little bit within their respective divisions, but this game is going to be another low-scoring affair. Denver's defense is pretty good, and the Colts' defense is nothing to be ashamed about either. But ultimately, this is still going to be another low-scoring affair. Both Chris Palmer and we're going to be taking the Denver Broncos to win this game. Maybe for different reasons, but I like the defense. In particular, Denver's defense is pretty good. They gave up 32 points last week, but I don't know. Indianapolis, they're a little hurt. Shaq Leonard, their outside linebacker, seems to have gotten hurt. That is their best player on defense. So the Colts look a little banged up, and Denver is a little banged up as well. Javonte Williams, their running back, is going to be out, but they still have Melvin Gordon, and they still have some good wide receivers. But ultimately, both Chris Palmer and I will be taking the Denver Broncos to win that game. So let's move on to the second London game of the year, the New York Giants against the Green Bay Packers. Now, who would have thought the Giants would start off the season 3-1? And now they have to go to London to play against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. And, man, they needed that win over the Patriots last week. Not in the conventional way that we expect the Packers to win, but they still ultimately got it done. This may still be another low-scoring affair, but ultimately both Chris Palmer and I are going to be taking the Green Bay Packers to win this game. So let's move on back to the United States, starting in the New England area, where the New England Patriots take on the Detroit Lions. Ooh, this is going to be a feisty game. And I think we're going to expect to see more Bailey Zappi in this game. But he may not be the one that ultimately decides it. It's probably going to be dictated on defense and the running game. The Detroit Lions, their running back DeAndre Swift is still a little hurt, but they still have another running back named Williams. He's going to be carrying the load for this Lions team. But ultimately, this is going to be a great game to watch, and I would love to see this game play out in person. But Chris Palmer is taking the Lions. I'm going to be taking the New England Patriots. So let's see. I don't know. As much as I like the Lions, they just can't seem to close out games. But I'm taking the Patriots, and Chris Palmer is taking the Lions. So let's move on to the New York Jets taking on the Miami Dolphins. Now, remember, the Dolphins are coming off of that loss from Cincinnati where Tua got hurt. Now, Tua's not going to be playing this game, so we're going to be expecting to see Teddy Bridgewater. Now, Teddy Bridgewater's a great quarterback, but both he's going to be getting the starting reps for the Dolphins, and the New York Jets, Zach Wilson, is going to be getting the starting reps this week coming into this game. This game is going to be played in New York, and a very crucial divisional game. Chris Palmer is taking the Miami Dolphins to win this game. I'm going to take the New York Jets for this upset. I like what I see with them, and I don't think Zach Wilson's going to win the game, but I think their running backs, Breece Hall and Michael Carter, are going to really carry the load for New York, and I really hope to see more of them as the season goes on, because the Jets have some stellar running backs, and this game is going to be great to watch. So Chris Palmer's taking the Dolphins, and I am taking the New York Jets. So let's move on to Chris Palmer's Pittsburgh Steelers playing against the Buffalo Bills, and Kenny Pickett, he's up against it. Up against that Buffalo defense, it is going to be rough sledding for them. But the Bills, they're a little hurt, but they're expected to get some players back. But let's see how this game plays out. I know in betting pools, as far as I know, the Bills are 14-point favorites, so they're definitely the favorites heading into this game. But I'm not sure if it's going to be that big of a blowout. It might be. It might be that big of a blowout, but we shall see. Both Chris Palmer and I are going to be taking the Buffalo Bills, and it would be a great upset if the Steelers win, but I would not expect it this time around. So let's move on to the city of Cleveland, where the Cleveland Browns are going to be taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Browns are going to be angry after that loss from Atlanta. But the Chargers, they look back to form. They're still hurt. They still have a lot of key injuries. They're going to be without Joey Bosa and Keenan Allen especially. But they did manage to pull off a good win over the Texans last week. But ultimately, both Chris Palmer and I are going to be taking the Los Angeles Chargers to take care of business over the Cleveland Browns. So let's stick to the AFC. And let's move to Jacksonville, where Jacksonville Jaguars are going to be taking on the Houston Texans. And man, the Jags are a feisty team. Who knew that the Jags would actually be a good team? I don't think anyone expected that. But oh man, this is going to be a showcase for Trevor Lawrence to see exactly what he can do. And man, I like what I'm seeing out of Jacksonville, but I also like what I'm seeing out of Houston. They are fighters. They are one of those teams that they just fight. But both Chris Palmer and I are going to be taking the Jacksonville Jaguars to win this game. So let's move on to the NFC with the Chicago Bears taking on the Minnesota Vikings. And the Bears, they are struggling. They got some wins early on in the season, but that may come to a halt when they face some tough competition like the Vikings. And this game is going to be played in Minnesota, a very tough game for the Bears to overcome. But ultimately, both Chris Palmer and I think that the Minnesota Vikings are going to win this game. And I think this game is going to be this is probably going to be a blowout. If I had to put money on it, I would say that this is going to be a blowout, because the Bears do not have the firepower to go up against the Vikings. And you hate to see it because you like to see Chicago win, but realistically, they're just not that talented on either side of the ball. So let's stick to the NFC, and let's go down to the Big Easy in New Orleans, where the Saints take on the Seattle Seahawks. The Saints are trying to get back to form because that was a rough loss against the Vikings in London. And the game ended specifically on the game-tying field goal, hitting the upright and then hitting off the upright again. That's what we call in football a double doink. But, man, I'm going to take the Saints to win this game, and so is Chris Palmer. I think the Saints get back to form. I think that I'm giving this more so for the home field advantage. If this game was played in Seattle, I think this would be a little bit different of a game, because Seattle's playing a lot better than people expected to. But the Saints, they're still competitive. They're still very highly competitive. But ultimately, we're both going to take the Saints to win against the Seahawks. So let's move on to Tom Brady's Buccaneers against the Atlanta Falcons. I think this is probably going to be a very close game. The the Bucs are still hurting. They're still hurting on both sides of the ball, but mostly on offense at their wide receiver position, I think. But they can still get it done. Even with a depleted wide receiving core, they were still able to put up 31 points on the Chiefs. Now, we know the Chiefs don't have that great of a defense, but it's still Brady. And he's still going to put up points whenever he can. Maybe not every week, but for most weeks he can. So both Chris Palmer and I are going to be taking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to beat the Atlanta Falcons. So let's move on to the Washington Commanders taking on the Tennessee Titans. Both teams, I think this is kind of a must-win game. But if Washington slips, they go 1-4. And Tennessee, if they slip, then they got to catch up to Jacksonville. And I don't think they ever expected that to happen. But I think the Titans are getting back to form. They're doing what they do best. They're running the ball. And Tannehill is distributing the ball to his playmakers. Obviously, they're without A.J. Brown because he's now a Philadelphia Eagle. But we're going to be taking the Tennessee Titans to win this game. I think the defense for Washington is not what it was. If it was, then it would be a different game. But we're going to take the Tennessee Titans to win over the Washington Commanders. And, oh, man, this is going to be a rough season for Washington, man. You live by Carson Wentz, you die by Carson Wentz. So let's stick to the NFC with the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Carolina Panthers. Oh, man, Niners look back to form. They just control the game. Like when they are in the zone, they just control the game with that stout running game. And Debo is just one of those special players that he's a playmaker. Carolina has been struggling as of late. Baker Mayfield cannot get it done, and their offensive line is just not what it needs to be. But ultimately, both Chris Palmer and I, we're going to be taking the San Francisco 49ers to win over the Carolina Panthers. So let's stick to the NFC for the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Woo, this might be a high-scoring game. The battle of the birds, as they say. But, man, I just don't see how Philly's going to stop. Oh, sorry, I don't see how Arizona's going to stop Philly. Their defense really isn't that good, but Philly is clicking on all sides. Offense, defense, special teams, they just have the juice to get them through. And Jalen Hurts is balling out, Miles Sanders, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, they're all just balling out in Philly. I'm going to take the Philadelphia Eagles, as well as Chris Palmer. He's going to be taking the Philadelphia Eagles to win this game. So let's, again, stick to the NFC for a little bit with the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Los Angeles Rams. Now, I don't think anyone expected the Cowboys to be 3-1 with a backup quarterback of Cooper Rush, but yet he is getting it done. They're running the ball effectively. They're not turning the ball over, and their defense is really what's leading them. Their defense is actually better than the Rams. Actually, yeah, it is better than the Rams. They're holding teams to under 20 points a game, and it's crazy to think about. But Dallas is getting it done. Can the Rams get back to form? I don't know. Their offensive line looks to be pretty suspect, but Chris Palmer's taking the Los Angeles Rams, but I'm going to be taking the Dallas Cowboys. I just think that defense is going to overwhelm Matt Stafford too much, especially when that offense is predictable as the Rams have become, where it's just look for Cooper Kupp and look for Tyler Higbee. And as great as those players are, if you're predictable, you're going to lose games. So let's move on to the Sunday night primetime game with my Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cincinnati Bengals in what looks to be a playoff game between these two. Cincinnati's getting hot at the right time, and the Ravens, they just can't seem to get out of their way. Man, that loss against Buffalo was really rough. But, man, Sunday night primetime, I'm putting my faith in Lamar to get it done. And even though he didn't really turn up in the second half of that Buffalo game, I think that Cincinnati defense is going to be real tough to take down Lamar and company. Now, I think this is probably going to be a high-scoring game. If I had to guess, this is probably going to be like 38-35. And if that's the case, I hope, John Harbaugh, you take the goddamn field goal. You have Justin Tucker, make sure you use him. But ultimately, Chris Palmer and I were going to be taking the Baltimore Ravens to beat the Cincinnati Bengals on Sunday night primetime, which leaves us with the last game for Week 5, which is the Las Vegas Raiders coming to Kansas City to play Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Woo! Oh, man. Now, the real question is, do the Raiders have the firepower to keep up with Patrick Mahomes and that offense? Oh, man. We know they have the firepower, but can they score the points? Can they cash out when they need to cash out? Oh, man, this is good. This is going to be a fun one to watch. But, man, it's hard to go against Patrick Mahomes in primetime. So, ultimately, we're going to take both Chris Palmer and I are going to be taking the Kansas City Chiefs to beat the Las Vegas Raiders, and I know that hurts Palmer in his heart because he does have a soft spot for the Raiders. But it's hard to argue with the Chiefs because they, after that big win against the Buccaneers, they look to be rolling. So that is it for Week 5. That is our predictions on the games for Week 5, and this is going to be an exciting weekend for football. I hope you have a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend of football, and I will catch you next week on the next episode of Let's Talk Football. If you like our channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and tune back for more great football content. Until then, we'll see you next week.